tied in a burning barn by her jealous sister. A Lakota chief carried her out and wed her that night. The smoke was already above the tree line when I saw it, not the thin gray of a cook fire or a trash burn. This was orange-bellied, rolling low and fast, the kind that means a structure going and going fast. I was 2 ridges east of the Harmon homestead on Kettle Creek. I knew whose land it was, because we had ridden it 4 times that summer, watching the settlers push further into the bottoms than the council had agreed to allow. I had been watching them the way a man watches a fever in a child, waiting to see if it would break on its own, or if something had to be done. That night something had to be done, but not the kind of thing I had ridden out expecting. My name is Lakota. My father named me that. It means friend to everyone, and there were years I resented it. Years when I thought a chief's son ought to have a name that sounded harder. The time I was old enough to lead men, I had stopped caring what a name sounded like. What a man does is the only name that sticks. I was 54 years old. My wife, Winona, had been dead 11 years. I had 2 sons and a daughter grown, and grandchildren. I hadn't held enough, because the world kept pulling at me. My hair was silver at the temples, and I wore it loose on watch rides. I had a scar that ran from my left jawline down my neck, a gift from a Crow raiding party when I was 28, and by the time I was 54, it had faded to a line a man had to look for. I mention these things only because they mattered to what happened that night. Not in any way I can explain cleanly, but they did. I rode toward the fire. Not because I was certain there was a person in it. I rode toward it because a structure burning at that hour, no alarm being raised, no one running, meant something was wrong. The Harmon homestead had 2 women on it. I knew that. The elder daughter managed it since the father died the previous winter. The younger had come out from Missouri 2 months prior. 2 women alone, barn burning, no screaming. I rode hard. I smelled her before I saw her. That sounds wrong, I know. What I mean is, I smelled the smoke. And inside the smoke, there was something that wasn't wood or hay or leather tack going up. Something alive in there and not able to get out. I have smelled that before, in raids and in brush fires, and in one terrible wagon accident east of the Black Hills, and a man's body knows it before his mind does. My horse knew it too. She pulled left and I had to hold her straight. The barn doors were chained. I saw the chain from 10 yards out. A heavy logging chain looped through the door handles and padlocked. Fire coming out of the gap between the doors, yellow-white at the bottom, where it had caught the straw along the floor. The padlock was cast iron, thick-throated, the kind used on root cellars and smokehouse doors. My rifle wouldn't open it. My knife wouldn't open it. I rode the perimeter of the barn in 8 seconds and found what I needed on the south wall. A section of siding that was old, the boards shrunken and gapped, not yet burning, because the wildfire had started near the north doors and was still chewing its way south. I tied my horse to a fence post 30 yards out, and I kicked those boards until 2 of them gave. The heat came through the gap like a fist. I pulled my riding blanket off the saddle, held it over my head, and went in. The interior was a wall of moving orange. The loft was already fully involved. I dropped low. There's cooler air close to the ground, not much. Enough to keep your lungs from cooking, and I moved in a crouch along the south wall, calling out because I couldn't see and I needed to hear something back. She answered, not with words at first. A sound, half cough, half cry, from somewhere near the center of the barn. I moved toward it and found her in the space between 2 empty stall partitions, on the ground, hands tied behind her around one of the stall posts. Rope, not chain, but a good knot. Tight enough that her wrists were already bleeding from pulling at it. She had her face pressed down against the dirt floor, trying to breathe the last thin layer of clean air. I cut the rope. My knife is not a small knife. She didn't speak. She tried to stand, and her legs folded. I pulled her arm across my shoulders, got one arm under her knees, and lifted her. She weighed less than I expected. She was coughing so hard, her whole body shook against my chest. I turned back toward the south wall, and I moved as fast as I could move, with a woman in my arms and a fire chewing at the air around us. The gap in the siding was still there. I turned sideways to fit us through it, and a burning timber dropped from the loft somewhere to my left and hit the ground 5 feet away. I felt the heat on the side of my face like a brand held close. Then we were through and I was walking fast, away from the barn, away from the heat, out into the cool dark of the creek bottom, and I set her down in the grass 20 yards out. And she was coughing, and I was coughing, and neither of us spoke for a full minute. The barn collapsed behind us. I heard it go, a long tearing sound, and then a crash, and then a sound like breathing, the fire drawing in on itself as the structure folded down. She rolled onto her side in the grass and kept coughing. Put my hand on her back. Not gently, not tenderly, just a flat hand between her shoulder blades, the way you'd settle a horse. And she coughed, through it, and then the coughing slowed. When she could breathe, she said, "My sister did this." That was the first thing she said to me. Not thank you, not who are you. My sister did this, I noted that. Her name was Cora Harmon, 37 years old. I learned the age later. That night she looked older than that. Her face ash-streaked and her eyes red from the smoke. She had her father's build, mother's coloring. I learned that too, later, from what she told me. Tall for a woman. Her hair was dark, not black, and long enough to have come half loose from whatever she'd had it in before the fire. Her hands, when she held them out, in the firelight of my camp that I made for us a mile up the creek, were working hands. Scarred across the knuckles, heel burn on her left forearm, from some prior accident, calluses on her fingers from reins or rope or a plow handle. Not the hands of a woman waiting to be taken care of. I asked her to tell me what happened, and she did, straight through, without flinching and without crying, sitting across the fire from me, wrapped in the same riding blanket I'd used, going into the barn. The younger sister, Ada, had arrived from Missouri 2 months ago. Their father had left the homestead equally between them in his will. Ada wanted it sold. Cora had refused. Ada had found a buyer in town, a landman with money from back east, and Cora had refused again, twice. And both times Ada had gone away and come back with new pressure, new arguments, new men from town backing her up. Cora had a piece of paper from the county recorder, properly filed, that said she could not be compelled to sell her half without her signature. Ada had learned about the paper 3 days ago. She waited until I was checking the horses, Cora said. I heard the chain go on the doors before I understood what she was doing. By the time I did, the fire was already in the straw. She said it the way you'd describe a fence that needed mending. Plain, like it had happened to someone she was watching from a distance, and she was just reporting what she saw. I have known men who couldn't hold themselves together, half as clean as that woman held herself together that night. I asked her where Ada was now. In town. She was already riding toward town when the chain went on. She has men there who'll say she was, with them all evening. I sat with that a moment. She means to collect the insurance on the barn, Cora said. There's a policy. My father took it out 3 years ago. Ada had a copy of it. I found that out this week. I asked what she needed from me. She looked at me across the fire. She had stopped looking at me, as if she were afraid of me somewhere in the first 10 minutes of sitting here. If she had been afraid at all, she was looking at me now, the way a person looks at another person when they're deciding how much truth to put in the room. Protection, she said. I can't go back to that homestead alone tonight. I can't go into town. Ada's men are there, and by morning they'll have a story built and I'll be the hysterical one. I have nobody. She stopped. Then she said, I don't know what you can give me or what it costs, but I'm asking. I thought about that for a while. The fire was low. Somewhere in the dark my horse shifted and blew. I told her she would ride with me to my camp, that no one would trouble her there. That in the morning we would go back to the homestead together, and she would show me the county recorder's paper, and I would sit with her while she sent a letter to the county seat. That I had a man in my band, His name was Ethan Cross, a half-white trapper who had lived with us 12 years, who could carry that letter, and who would not be stopped on the road or have his saddlebags searched by any man Ada could hire. She listened to all of that. Then she said, "Why would you do this?" I told her the truth. I told her that a woman tied in a burning barn was a wrong I did not intend to ride past, that this land had seen enough of what people did to each other when they thought no one was watching, that I was tired of it. She nodded once. That was all. We rode to camp. My camp that fall was set a fold of the hills 6 miles north of Kettle Creek. A spring ran clean and the cottonwoods gave enough cover that the cook fires didn't show from the trail. 15 lodges, 60-some people, counting the children. Not a war band. We were not at war that season, not openly, but not a soft camp either. My men were awake when I rode in because my horse's return with a second rider behind me was the kind of thing they noticed. I told Charging Bull, who was my second, what had happened. In our language, in front of Cora, because I had nothing to hide. Charging Bull looked at her the way he looked at most things, as a possible problem until proven otherwise. She sat on her horse and looked back at him the same way. That almost made me smile. I gave her a lodge, a small one, unoccupied since its owner, an old woman named Walks Far, had gone to stay with her daughter's family the month before. I told Running Doe, was 12 and quick, and spoke a handful of English words, to bring water and food. Running Doe did it, watched Cora with large eyes from the lodge entrance. And Cora thanked her with enough warmth that Running Doe went away pleased. I did not sleep that night. That was not unusual. I sat outside my own lodge with the camp quiet around me, and I thought about what I had done and came next. I had brought a white woman into camp. This was not the first time a settler woman had been under our protection. There had been situations over the years, a family in a hard winter, a woman whose husband had died on the trail. But it was always complicated. There were men in the territory who would see what they wanted to see, regardless of what was true, and what they would want to see was provocation. But I had made a decision, and I didn't second-guess decisions after I made them. That was a discipline I had learned from my father, and it had served me well for 30 years. You decide clean, you act, you carry what comes. What I didn't think about, what I kept not thinking about, in the way a man deliberately looks away from a thing because he doesn't trust himself to look at it clearly, was the woman herself. The way she had said my sister did this, the working hands, plain way she held herself inside, something that would have folded most people. I am telling you this now as an old man, and I will tell it honestly. I noticed her that night. I noticed her the way a man who has been alone a long time notices something alive and warm, true, and doesn't know what to do with the noticing. I put it away. I had enough to think about. The first morning she was up before me. Shh. I know this because when I came out of my lodge at the gray edge of dawn, the fire at the camp center had been freshly built, not rebuilt. Built up carefully from what had burned low in the night, the way you do it when you know what you're doing. Small dry sticks first, then larger pieces set in the right cross, enough air between them. The coffee, we had coffee. Ethan Cross brought it in from the trading post, and it was the one concession I made to what he called civilized living. The coffee was already on. Shh. She was sitting with her knees pulled up watching the fire take. She heard me come up and didn't startle, just turned her head and looked at me, and then looked back at the fire. I poured a cup and sat across from her. She said, I wasn't sure what was permitted. With the fire. I watched last night and thought I knew how it was done here. I told her she had it right. She nodded once, satisfied. And we sat with the coffee while the camp woke up around us. Shh. I noticed that she watched everything. Not with the wide-eyed jitteriness of someone in a foreign place, but with the steady attention of someone cataloging information they intend to use. When Charging Bull came out of his lodge and stopped short seeing her at the fire, she met his look evenly and nodded, and he gave her a small nod back and went about his business. That meant something. Charging Bull did not give acknowledgments easily. Later that day, she asked me the names of things. Not words in a tourist's way, collecting phrases to take home and display. She asked because she wanted to use them correctly. When I told her the word for the fire, she said it twice, quietly, listening to herself say it. Shh. When Running Doe brought the midday meal, Cora tried the word for thank you. And Running Doe covered her mouth with her hand and laughed. Cora said, "What?" And Running Doe said, "Your accent makes it sound like you are thanking the bowl." Cora looked at the bowl seriously and said the word again, differently. And Running Doe laughed harder. That was the first time I saw Cora smile. It did something to her face. Not a softening exactly. More like a window opened somewhere. I did not think about it. 3 days passed. Ethan Cross rode to the county seat with Cora's letter and returned with a written response from the county recorder, confirming the filing and noting any insurance claim on the property would require both signatures, as the policy had been co-signed by both daughters as heirs. This was news to Ada. Ethan heard it from the landman's clerk, who had a loose mouth and liked the sound of his own voice. On the second day, a man rode to the edge of the camp under a white cloth. Not a soldier, a hired rider, badly shaved, smelling of town, and delivered a message addressed to Miss Cora Harmon. The message was from Ada. It said that Ada was grieved by what had happened, that it must have been an accident with the lantern, and that she was prepared to offer Cora a revised settlement if Cora would come to town and discuss it. Cora read the message once, set it in the fire. I watched the paper curl and go. On the third day, 2 men from the sheriff's office rode out. The sheriff himself did not come, told me something about what he thought of the situation. The sheriff was not a brave man, but he was a careful one. Careful men stay out of things they have not sized up. The 2 deputies were polite. In the way men are polite, when they are aware they are outnumbered and on someone else's ground. They told Cora she was free to return to the homestead and that the county would be looking into the barn fire. They did not look at me when they spoke to her, which was a choice they made deliberately. I let it go. Cora thanked them pleasantly and said she would return to the homestead when she was ready. After they rode out, she came to where I was working. Our reparation of the horse pen that had taken some damage in a late storm, shoring up the corner post with new timber, and she said, "They won't do anything. You know that." I drove the post deeper with the back of my hatchet and said, "Yes, I knew that." "She'll try something else," Cora said. "She won't let it sit. Ada doesn't let things sit. She takes hold of something and worries it until it gives or until someone takes it away from her." I said I expected that was right. She was quiet a moment. I kept working. She had learned in 3 days that I was not a man who felt the need to fill silence, and she had stopped trying to fill it for me. A lot of people can't do that. They get uncomfortable in silence and start talking to fill it, and what comes out is usually not the thing they actually wanted to say. Cora let silence be silence. I appreciated that more than I had words for at the time. Then she said, "I want to stay." I set the hatchet down. "Not indefinitely," she said. "Or maybe indefinitely. I don't know yet." She paused, choosing words the way she chose everything, deliberately. "I know I am safe here, and I am not safe anywhere else right now." "I know that I am." She stopped. Started again. "I have been useful here." Shh. Running Doe has been teaching me the beadwork, and I have been teaching her English composition in return. And your man, Bare Ribs, let me help with the horses yesterday, and didn't make it a spectacle when I knew what I was doing. Nobody has treated me like a problem to be managed. I looked at her. "Ada will come for the land again," she said. "With the barn gone, she has less leverage, but she'll find another angle. Ada always finds another angle. If I am here. If I am under your protection openly, in a way the county knows about and can't easily dismiss, it changes what she can do. She can't claim I've gone missing. She can't claim I'm unstable or have abandoned the property. She has to deal with me as a person who has made a deliberate choice." All of that was true. All of that was practical. It was the kind of thinking I respected. No sentiment in it, no appeal to emotion, just the plain shape of a situation laid out honest. I asked her if she understood staying here meant, what people would say, what it would cost her in the settler world, in town, with families who had known her father, with the church circuit that came through twice a year. She looked out at the hills for a moment. The light was getting long, and the grass was still green from the last rain. And the hills looked the way they look in the fall, but before the color goes out of things, when everything is using up the last of the warm, she said. What it costs me in that world is less than what it costs me to go back to it. I picked up the hatchet. I finished the post. I did not speak, and she did not press me, and after a while she walked back toward the camp, and I listened to her footsteps in the dry grass until I didn't hear them anymore. I thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. I thought about it over the evening meal, when she sat with Running Doe and Old Looks Twice, and the three of them were working on something with their hands, and talking in a mix of two languages and laughter. I thought about it after supper when the fire was low and the camp was settling toward sleep. That night I asked Charging Bull to call the elders together. We sat for 2 hours, the elders and I. 4 men older than me, 2 women who were grandmothers of the camp and whose opinion I valued above most. I put it plain. A white settler woman, wronged by her own blood, was asking for the camp's formal protection. Not a temporary thing, a standing thing. I told them her situation in full, the way she had told it to me. I told them about the burning barn and the padlock and the county recorder's paper and the insurance claim and Ada and the landman from back east. I told them she was capable and had conducted herself with respect inside the camp and had not asked for anything she hadn't needed. 4 Crows, who was 68 and had seen 3 treaties broken, and had earned the right to be skeptical of anything involving the land and white people, asked what she wanted from the arrangement. I said protection of her legal claim and a safe place to stand while she dealt with her sister's attempts to take what was rightfully hers. Old Looks Twice, who was 70, and had outlived 2 husbands and 3 horses she'd liked better than either of them, said, "You want more than to protect her." I didn't answer. She said, "That is not a criticism, Dakota. I am telling you what I see, and I see it clearly." There was quiet in the lodge then. Fire popped. One of the men shifted. Charging Bull said after a while, "If she stays without a formal tie, she is a guest indefinitely, and that is complicated. If she stays with a formal tie, she is family, and that is clear. The county understands a wife in a way they do not understand a refugee." He was right. Charging Bull was almost always right about the practical shape of things. Was why I kept him close, even when he said things I didn't want to hear. I said that the woman had not been asked about a formal tie, and I would not speak for her. Looks Twice said, "Then go ask her. I want to be careful how I tell this part. I want to tell it the way it was, not the way a man tells a story he is proud of, is a different thing." I went to her lodge. She was awake. I could see the small light of a candle inside. I scratched at the lodge, covering the way you do, and she said, "Come in," and I went in and sat down, and there was the candle between us, and she waited. I told her what the elders had said. I told her that staying as a formal member of the band, as my wife, by our custom, recognized in our law, if not in the county's, would make her position clear and protected in a way that staying as a guest could not. The county would understand a wife. They would struggle to dismiss a wife. And any action Ada took against the homestead would be an action taken against land in which the chief of the Hunkpapa band at Kettle Creek had an interest, and there were men in the county government who were not eager to have that particular conversation. I told her that I was not asking her to feel something she didn't feel, that I would not make this offer as a convenience or a transaction, because that was not the kind of man I was, and she deserved to know that plainly. I told her what I was offering was real, that I had thought about it honestly and I was asking her with full intention, but that she had no obligation and no pressure, and that if she said no, the camp's protection stood regardless, and I would find another way to help her secure the land. She sat with the candle between us, and she didn't speak for a while. I waited. I was a man who had made decisions in the field under fire, and then sat quietly while others decided whether to follow, and I knew how to hold still inside a silence that mattered. Then she said, "Do you want this?" It was a direct question. She was a direct woman. I said yes. She said, "Since when?" I said I didn't know exactly. Possibly since the moment she said my sister did this and didn't cry. She almost smiled at that. Just the corner of her mouth, the way she did. The window opening, not the full smile but its beginning. She said, "I am not a woman who performs. I don't know how to be decorative or how to make a man feel like more than he is. I say what I think. I argue when I believe I'm right, and I'm right more often than people expect. I work hard. I am slow to trust and quick to see when trust is being wasted. Those things won't change." I said I hadn't asked them to. She looked at me across the candle. It was a long look, not measuring, exactly, but something close to it. The look of a person deciding whether what is in front of them is as solid as it presents itself to be. I had been looked at a great many ways in my life, and I knew the difference between a look that is calculating and a look that is honest, and that look was honest. Then she said yes. Just the one word. She didn't dress it up. The ceremony was not elaborate. I have seen it done more elaborately. When my eldest son married, there were 2 days of preparation, feasting, songs that went into the night. This was none of that. It was late at night, the camp quiet, looks twice, and charging bull present, because they were the witnesses who mattered in our custom. There was a fire. There were words, the old words, the ones my father's father used and his father before him, the words that have been said over fires, like this one, since before anyone alive can remember what came before them. I said them, shh, and Cora stood beside me, and when it was her part, looks twice told her the words, and she said them carefully. The same attention she gave everything, making sure she had them right. And then it was done, twice. Clasped Cora's hands in both of hers, and held them and said something in Lakota. I did not translate it in the moment. Later, when I told Cora what it meant, she went quiet and looked at the far wall of the lodge for a long time. What Looks Twice said was, "You carry the fire, but it does not burn you. This man will know what to do with that." We walked back to my lodge, our lodge, now, and the camp was still around us. And the stars were sharp the way they get in the fall when the season has turned for good, and the air has no water in it. She walked beside me, not behind me. I noticed that, and I didn't say anything about it, because there was nothing to say. It was right. At the lodge entrance, she stopped, looked out at the dark, the hills, the black cut of the creek trees against the sky. She stood like that for a moment, and I waited. She said, "I don't have anything. Everything I own is either ash in that barn or in Ada's keeping." I said she was standing on everything she needed. She turned then and looked at me. Not a long look this time, not the deciding look, but something past deciding, something that had already passed through and come out the other side. A woman who has made a choice and is inside it now. She put her hand on my chest, flat, the same way I had put my hand on her back in the grass by the burning barn, plain and present, no performance in it. And she said, "Then let's go in." We went in. What happened after took time, the way real things take time. The county sent a man to investigate the barn fire. He interviewed 3 people, wrote a brief report, and concluded the cause, was undetermined. Ada filed the insurance claim the following week. The insurance company, which had a better lawyer than the county, had an investigator, sent their own man, who spent 4 days on the site, and was more thorough than the county man had been by a long way. He found the remnants of the chain. A logging chain doesn't melt entirely, and cast iron leaves evidence that a careful man knows how to read. He found the padlock in the debris. He found the pattern of the burn, which started at the doors and moved inward in a way that a lantern accident does not. He filed a report that used the word arson twice, without coming out and saying arson directly, which was a lawyer's way of saying arson while leaving himself room. The insurance claim was denied. Ada came to the homestead that winter with a new argument, and a different lawyer and a great deal of noise. Cora was not at the homestead. Cora was at our camp, 3 hours north, and Cora's reply to Ada's lawyer arrived by Ethan Cross on Cora's own letterhead, the one she had made herself, written careful and neat on a good sheet of paper, her name, and the homestead's legal description along the top. True. The reply noted that any legal proceedings regarding the property would need to be directed to her and her legal counsel, and that she was residing with her husband, Lakota, chief of the Hunk Papa band at Kettle Creek, and that she was well and intended to remain so. The lawyer did not reply. Ada sold her share of the homestead to the landman the following spring at what Ethan heard was a poor price, less than half of what the landman had originally offered for the whole, and moved back to Missouri. I have not heard her name since, and I have not looked for it. The homestead itself, Cora's half of it, she did not sell. She leased the grazing land to a rancher named Aldous Pitts, who was a fair man, and paid on time, and didn't have the kind of ambitions that lead to trouble. The money she put toward a second horse and a good rifle and a bolt of wool cloth that we needed for the camp that winter. Practical choices, and they were appreciated in the way practical things are appreciated when you have lived close to the edge of not having enough. Cora learned Lakota the way she learned everything. Straight at it, without apology for being slow, with a retentive memory that surprised people who had made assumptions about her before they knew her. By the second year, she could manage a full conversation with looks twice without my help. Looks twice, trusted slowly, and granted respect more slowly still, began calling her by a name she had given her. It meant something like the woman who, which was both what she had seen Cora do on that first morning, and what she meant went about the way Cora's mind worked. Cora wore it without ceremony, which was exactly the right way to wear it. By the third year, she was the person Running Doe went to when she wanted to practice her English compositions before presenting them to anyone else, and Running Doe was sharp enough to know who was worth going to and who was not. Charging Bull told me once, in a tone that was as close to admiring as Charging Bull ever got, that Cora argued about the horse breeding plan, the way a person argues who has thought about something for longer than you have, and knows it. I said yes. He said she was right about the breeding plan. I said I know. He said nothing more, but the fact that he told me it all meant he had decided something about her in the slow way he decided things. There was a season in the third year, midsummer, the stretch of hot days when the grass goes yellow before the rains come, when a party of surveyors from the railroad company came through the territory. Not on our land, technically, but close enough to be looking. I rode out with 4 men to have a conversation with the survey party, and it was the kind of conversation that requires a man to be very clear, calm, and very certain of where the lines are. It lasted 3 hours. When I came back to camp that evening, later than I had intended, Cora was at the fire. She looked at me the way a person looks who has been waiting without letting themselves worry, which is its own kind of worry worn quietly. She looked at the state of me. I had dust in everything, and I had not eaten since morning, and there was a cut on my left hand from a strand of wire I had grabbed without thinking. And she said nothing about any of it. She handed me a plate and sat down across from me while I ate. After a while she said, "The survey party." I said yes. She said, "We're going to need to move the camp." The way she said we, without thinking about it, without emphasis, without it being a thing she was deciding in the moment. Just we. It had been 3 years, and it still hit me sometimes, that word coming from her. I said I didn't think so. I said the conversation had gone, the way such conversations went, when a man held his ground, and the other men understood that the ground was held. She said, "Good. And then, eat the rest of that." I ate the rest of it. Chit. I have told you about the night of the fire and the night of the ceremony because those are the bones of the thing, parts that have shape when you look back at them. A burning barn, a padlocked door. A woman who said my sister did this without crying. A fire between two people and one word. Yes, the rest of it. 11 years since that October. The life built day by day from the ordinary materials of cold and heat and work and argument and children's voices and old horses and the kind of winter that tests whether what you have built is real. I don't know how to put that into words in a way that doesn't make it smaller than it is. The ordinary days are the weight of a life. The remarkable nights are just the pegs it hangs on. What I can tell you is this. There was a morning 2 winters after the ceremony. We had taken a hard early snow, the kind that comes in October before anyone is ready, 3 feet of it in a night. The horses, standing up to their knees in the paddock, and the camp quiet under a weight that muffled everything. The whole world turned temporary and white. I had been out since, before first light, checking the herd and making sure the older lodges had enough bracing to hold under the load. My oldest mare had taken the cold badly in her joints, and I had spent an hour with her, working the stiffness out, talking to her the way you do, low and even, the same words that have no meaning but the tone of them. I came back to camp cold to the bone, the kind of cold that isn't just on the skin, but is inside the joints themselves. That makes a man's hands stop working right. I was 66 years old, and that kind of cold was starting to mean something it hadn't meant at 40. She was at the fire. She had it built right. Not roaring, just steady. The kind of fire that holds heat for hours. The kind you build when you know what cold is, and what it does to people. She had been up before me, which she often was. She had already done the morning count of the stores. She did it every morning now. Neat columns in the small ledger she kept, her handwriting small and clear, and, from the look on her face when I came in, the numbers were all right. She handed me a cup without being asked. Hot, strong, both hands around it. She didn't say anything about the cold or my hands or the mare. She just handed me the cup and sat down across the fire with her own. And she looked at me, not at the problem I'd come back from, or the cold I was carrying, or the list of things that still needed doing. At me. The way she had been looking at me for 3 years by then, which I had still not entirely gotten used to, and which I was not sure I wanted to get used to, because getting used to it would mean it had become ordinary, and it was not ordinary. A woman who has looked at you clearly, in the full, and decided to stay. Not because she had to, not because she had no other choice, because she chose it. That look is not ordinary, and a man should not let himself treat it as ordinary. I sat with the cup between my hands and felt the warmth move up through my fingers, and I looked back at her. After a while she said, "Cold to your edges." I said yes. She said, "Come here then." I moved around the fire and she made room, and I sat beside her and she took both my hands in hers. Not carefully, not like something fragile, but the way you take hold of something you intend to keep. And she held them, until the cold began to leave. Outside the snow was still falling, soft and steady. The camp was warm, my people were whole, and this woman, who had been tied in a burning barn by her own blood, and walked out saying, "Only my sister did this," who had sat across a fire from a stranger, and asked for what she needed without begging or performing, who had said yes with one word and meant it with everything she had. This woman was beside me now, with my cold hands in hers, and she had not taken any of it back in all the years between. There is a thing a man knows about himself, living alone for a long time. He knows what he is worth, or he ought to. I knew what I had done. I knew what I was. I had led men, and held ground, and made decisions that cost something, and stood by them. I did not need to be told I was worth something. Being chosen is different from being respected. Being seen, not your rank, not your usefulness, not what you can do, particular man inside all of that. Being seen that way, by a person who has looked clearly, and has had better options, and has chosen to stay. Anyway, that is a different thing. A man can know his own worth and still be hungry for that. There is no shame in it. She held my hands until they were warm. The fire was low. The snow was still. She said quietly, not making it a moment, just saying it. I'm glad you rode toward the fire. I looked at her. She looked back, no performance, no sentiment. Just a plain, true thing said plainly. I said, so am I. She turned back to the fire and I stayed where I was, and after a while her shoulder was against mine. Easy and familiar. The way it was every morning now, and the warmth had come all the way back into my hands. And outside the snow kept coming down, white and soft and covering everything. That is what I have. That is what I am telling you. That is enough.